Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Experience, where we talk to a lot of different actors and directors. And those of you that know us know that we have quite an eclectic group of people, including us, me and Ethan Detmeyer. Hello, Ethan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. It's good to be here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm busy, shooting at the moment. So it's always good to be on a set. I actually like being on a set. I realize I'm kind of happiest being on a set.
Yeah.
It's there's a world on the set that kind of is interesting. I mean, but let's talk about our guest today. I want to talk about Adrienne Wilkinson. And Ethan, you're semi aware of Adrienne, but I'm kind of excited because I knew Adrienne back a few years back when Elizabeth Grayson actually introduced us, and she's done a plethora of things. Some of you might know her on Xena, but she's been producing, she's been directing, and also, a lot of the time we have male points of view on this show, and I think this is a totally different take on finding an actress's point of view as to what it's like to be in the movies when there's action pieces around, and how the movie industry has changed from the 80s and 90s to today. So I think we'll get to that interview right away, and then we'll be right back and we can have a little chat about what you heard. Hello, good morning. Hello, Adrienne. How are you? You're in an undisclosed location somewhere, right?
Oh, it's super secret, and of course, incredibly sexy and luxurious and amazing.
Yeah, don't you think a lot of the time people think actors live this like plush life a lot of the time, and you've got this amazing thing that you've got going on, and nobody can touch you. It's super life, and in reality,
I mean, you don't have people just handing you caviar all day long. I mean, that's totally my experience. Really, that's.
Yeah, isn't it just? I mean, I think when you first start, I think you kind of get this idea of what being an actor is all about. But then when you actually go through the process, you realize all these other things that you never even took into account when you first started.
I don't know. For me, I grew up as a dancer, so I was on stage a lot. So I kind of already knew how the donuts were made in terms of what people see on stage versus what it's actually like to create something. And it's, people think of actors and they do think of they think of the glamour. They think of the red carpets and things like that, which honestly are also not glamorous, but they think of the idea that they have of what an actor is, where I think acting is incredibly blue collar. It's very tangible work that you are collaborating with. I mean, think of a set, it's construction workers, it's electricians, it's all of that, right. But then you also have the creativity with it.
Yeah, I mean, the process is very different than what most people expect. I remember I was shooting in Lithuania, and this kid, I was in a bar, we walked into the bar, he goes, "Oh, you're the guy from the movies. You're a movie?" I said, "Yeah, I'm in the movies." He said, "Oh, that's pretty cool." He said, that's what's it like? I said, "Well, it's a lot of work. You got to go through the." "Nah," I said, "it's easy. You just have to learn your lines and just get on there, don't you?" So people's conception of what it is to actually do something is always, I'm always surprised, because you've been in the business. Like you said, you started as a dancer, which I did as well. You kind of understand that, but for somebody that's not used to the business, they have all these questions that, why did you take that job, and why didn't you take this job, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
they often think far more is in our hands or our control than actually is, which
absolutely.
Is definitely frustrating for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you? So tell me how you started, because you started as a dancer, but what pushed you into becoming an actor?
My story is pretty ridiculous. I was a senior in high school, and I had been a dancer my entire life, basically since I could walk. And I loved it, but it wasn't something I planned to do as a profession. But I was having my senior yearbook portraits taken, and I had gone to a studio in town to have them taken. And this was a very small Midwestern town. And the ugly truth, or the amusing truth, is that I got upsold. The photographer was hosting an acting class that weekend, and he kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I was 16, turning 17 in a few days, and just had not yet learned how to say no. and he just kept pushing me like a good salesman does, until finally I was like, okay, I'll do it. It sounds good. And it's not that I didn't want to. It's just that it seemed sort of superfluous to me. But anyway, this was this tiny Midwestern town, and unbeknownst to me, what I had signed up for was a weekend workshop that Los Angeles casting directors were teaching. And it was the head of ABC and the head of ABC Daytime and a third person that was also quite a big deal. And I was absolutely green. I had stage presence and I understood storytelling, but I had never, ever acted in my life. And they were using current sides to teach the classes, and they were recording it on, this is back when it was like a VHS tape and one of those.
I remember those.
Exactly. And anyway, they recorded it. And about a week later, after they had gone back to Los Angeles and I had gone back to high school and just life was moving on, and I got a call from the photographer, and he said, ABC, the sides that you used were for a soap opera on ABC, and they were offering me the job. They had been looking and couldn't find anyone. And through this fluke experience, I got offered this contract role in a soap opera, living in a small town in the Midwest.
So was that Saved by the Bell, or was that Sweet Valley High?
It was One Life to Live. I did not do that job because my parents were like, what? That's a scam. That's crazy. They did not believe it at all. And of course, at 17, I couldn't take the job, but it was a contract role on One Life to Live, which would have meant me, it was like, I can't remember if it was 3 or 5 years, but it was a full on contract. And, they just
said no.
They thought it was crazy. Yeah. Well, they just thought it was nuts. And so I missed it. But I stayed in contact both with that photographer and with the casting director who had offered me a job. And later in the year, I was still 17, but he said, I have another thing that's come up, and he had me record it remotely. And I got offered a second contract role on a different soap opera. And I just thought, they're giving this stuff away. They're just giving these jobs away. Like, they need me. So it completely changed my plan. I had plans for college, and I decided as soon as I graduated, like 2 days after I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles. And just expecting them to be waiting with open arms with me for jobs. and thinking I was about to start my grown-up life with, some huge role. And the hilarious thing is that casting director, who was my one fan, the one person I knew, 2 weeks after I arrived in Los Angeles, he quit the business to pursue his dream of becoming a chef. So
wow.
I suddenly did not know anyone. So yeah, then I just became like every other actor who is trying to, find their feet. And I was lucky because through those connections, I arrived with an agent, which really up-leveled my experience. But it was me just, pounding the pavement like everybody else. And yeah, my first 2 jobs were these teeny bopper shows, Sweet Valley High and Saved by the Bell. So, and yeah, the soap opera thing, I did one guest star on a soap opera, and then I did a web series that was a spinoff of a soap opera, but that's my entire soap experience.
and then you got Xena a few years later, about 3 or 4 years later, right?
Yeah, a couple of years later. And I wasn't really familiar with it. I knew the cultural reference. It was in the zeitgeist, but I had never seen the show. And the story is, I thought I had no chance at the job because they were casting Xena's nemesis. And I thought we looked too much alike. I thought there's no way I'll get hired for that because we look fairly similar. And the top secret news was that they were casting her daughter, who was her nemesis. So it turns out it was, perfect, but I didn't know that until after I booked the job. Then they told me.
So how was that going in there? Because obviously that was all sword stuff and action a lot of the time. Was that the first intro to action that you'd gotten?
It was trial by fire. It was my first real action scenes. And Lucy Lawless in real life had just had a baby. So they were trying to make her schedule as easy as possible because she was still nursing and still just, getting back to post pregnancy. And so the episodes were incredibly focused on me. And I was supposed to be this, like the best warrior that had ever lived kind of a thing. So fight scenes and fire and swords and blood and, just everything, which on one hand was a dream. I mean, I ate it like with a spoon. It was so fun. Just everything you want as an actor. It's great locations, amazing costumes, crazy props, and cool people to work with. And just, it was just fun and yummy. But it was the most exhausting thing I think I've ever done because it was all new to me. So I was the first 2 episodes I did, I had more screen time than anyone. So it was just a lot of work. But every time I wasn't working, I was learning fight choreography and learning how to ride a horse and how to ride a horse around fire. And, like all of these pieces that meant in a great way, I didn't have a chance to worry because I had so much on my plate. All I could do was focus on the next thing and then focus on the next thing and then the next thing. So it didn't even occur to me to worry about the bigger picture, or I just didn't have the energy to be stressed out or have any self-doubt. It was just the next step and the next step.
And what was it like at first? I mean, obviously this was very foreign to you. Was it easy to pick up? Was it like choreography and dance? Were the movements in sword and action very explained to you or hard to grasp? What was the process for you?
It was twofold. I picked up choreography very quickly because of the dance background, so I could learn it very fast. But my problem is I had a pretty strong ballet background. And so I naturally did almost everything on my toes. So, so it was like a fairy fighting or something when I was supposed to be, sort of raw and rough. And the other thing is that the first week we were fighting almost exclusively on sand. And when I would do turns, I would be on my toes. And so I would basically drill myself into the sand and then I would be up to my ankle in sand. And, that was not sexy or impressive. So, it took me a minute to really, really, truly get into it. I would say the first week I was okay, but I was not great. I was not a great fighter at all. But at the end of the first week, the stunt double that I was working with made a mistake and hit me with the sword. And it somehow changed everything for me because my biggest fear had been hurting somebody, that I would somehow hurt them. So I was being a little too careful when I fought. And then after I got hit, and I got this really kind of amazing bruise, I remember my makeup artist taking pictures of it. She's like, "Oh, that'll be a great one to recreate." But what was interesting is that after getting hit, I was like, "Oh, I can take it. Like, that was no big deal. That's totally it." It was no longer scary. So then I was able to commit at a different level. And so the first week, I think I was okay at fighting, but not amazing. But the second week, I was great at fighting. I had figured it out and I was loving it. And then the third week, the plot changed and suddenly I found religion and was no longer fighting.
Is that right?
And it was kind of heartbreaking for me because I had this amazing, cool character that was, she was supposed to be the best warrior in ancient Rome. And then all of a sudden she found religion and gave up all violence. And so that all of a sudden I was dressed in rags instead of my incredibly cool warrior costume. And I
you
was
were dressed down at that point.
Oh, it was the worst. It was the worst. And then, equally, what I loved about the character was that she was incredibly smart. She was savvy. She was just incredibly charismatic. And suddenly she became very weak and constantly needed to be rescued because she refused to help herself. She refused to fight. She refused to be engaged in that way any longer. And so it was a real shift in what I had been hired to do. And, it took some navigating, and the overall story was beautiful because it was about redemption. But in terms of fun, the original character of Livia was way more fun.